For over 3,000 years, the Nika fruit has been waking up the same person over and over again, and it's not Luffy. 5 people have eaten this fruit across One Piece history. 5. And only one of them is Monkey D. Luffy. The other 4 changed the world so completely that we've been staring at the evidence for years without putting it together. A robot that wakes up for no reason. A pregnancy that lasted 20 months. A slave revolt that shouldn't have been possible. So who were the other 4 gods of the sun? And what does it mean that the fruit has been choosing its users this whole time? Okay, stay with me here, because to understand why this theory works, we need to go back to what we actually know for certain. In Punk Hazard, Oda gave us a rule that felt small at the time but turns out to be one of the most important mechanics in the entire series. When a devil fruit user dies, the fruit doesn't disappear. It regenerates somewhere in the world and waits for a new person to eat it. That single rule is the backbone of this entire theory. The fruit we're talking about is the Hito Hito no Mi model, Nika, a mythical zone that turns its user into the literal sun god. We officially know 2 users, Luffy, obviously, and Joy Boy, the legendary figure from 800 to 900 years ago who first awakened its powers during the Void Century. In chapter 1116, Vegapunk's worldwide broadcast confirms Joy Boy was a young man from the Great Kingdom, an advanced nation that went to war against the 20 countries that would later form the world government. His body stretched. He fought like the sun god. He was, by the manga's own definition, the first pirate in history. But here's the thing most people skip right past: a fruit doesn't just sit around for 800 years waiting for the right person. Between Joy Boy and Luffy, that fruit had to die and reappear over and over. That's 3 empty centuries with no confirmed user. And once you start looking at what actually happened in those gaps, things stop feeling empty at all. But that's where things start getting strange. Let's start with the oldest clue Oda has ever given us, because it changes the entire scale of this theory. In Elbaf, we're introduced to a sacred giant text called Hari. It splits world history into 3 eras: the first world, the second world, the Void Century, and the third world, the era of Luffy. According to the giants, both the first and second worlds were destroyed, and in each of those worlds, a figure known as the Sun God appeared. That means there was a sun god before Joy Boy, a First Nika, more than 3,000 years old. In chapter 1144, Frankie finds an ancient piece of technology buried in Elbaf, something that looks like a dormant robot, confirmed to be over 3,000 years old. I had to go back and reread this 3 times, because that's the exact same setup as the Iron Giant, Emmett, who was Joy Boy's companion during the Void Century. If both Nicks had a robot companion, and Luffy has Frankie in his own crew right now, that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern Oda is repeating on purpose. The first Nika failed, just like Joy Boy would later fail. The first world was destroyed, but he left something behind: relics, ruins, and a fruit that would resurface centuries later in the hands of the next chosen one. That next one is Joy Boy. And we already know how his story ends. The Great Kingdom fell, the world flooded in the Great War, and the fragmented world we know today is what survived. But before he died, he left a promise carved into a poneglyph that he'd return. He left allies like Tsunade. He left a treasure on the final island. And most importantly, he left a fruit that needed to reincarnate and find the next chosen one. And this is where Oda may have left his biggest clue. 200 years ago, something happened that doesn't make sense unless you accept what I'm about to lay out. Emmett, the same Iron Giant from the Void Century, suddenly climbed the red line all the way to Mary Geoise and then shut down again before finishing whatever he was doing there. The world government ordered him discarded. Scientists, fascinated by the tech, dumped him on Egghead instead, where Vegapunk eventually found him and spent years trying to figure out his power source. Vegapunk's satellite Lilith says it herself on Egghead: if an eternal flame existed, it could create a sun with supposedly infinite energy. But Vegapunk never found that source, not until Luffy's heart started beating to the drums of liberation in Wano. And that sound reached the Iron Giant all the way on Egghead, and it woke up. That's the answer Vegapunk spent his whole life looking for. The energy isn't chemical, isn't electrical, it's the vibration of an awakened Nika user's heartbeat. Nothing else can replicate it. So if the Iron Giant activated 200 years ago, climbed the red line, and attacked Mary Geoise, and The only known trigger for that activation is an awakened Nika user's heartbeat. Then there was a third Nika, someone alive 200 years ago who fully awakened the fruit. And here's a detail most people miss. When a Nika user is dying, the fruit tries to save them. It revived Enel with an electric shock. It made Luffy's heart restart in Wano. So maybe the third Nika hit that same critical moment. The fruit woke up, kept the Iron Giant active for a few minutes, but it wasn't enough. The user died shortly after, and Emmett lost power again. And honestly, the timing is too perfect to ignore. 200 years ago is the exact period the movement against fishman discrimination started gaining real traction in the world. But here's the detail nobody talks about. When Luffy was imprisoned in Impel Down, a guard told him a story about the sun god Nika, a legendary figure worshipped by slaves as the one who would come to free them. Luffy, curious, asked Jinbei if he'd heard of it. Jinbei led a crew called the Sun Pirates, a crew of fishermen dedicated to freeing slaves, named after the sun god. That's not a coincidence. That's a name passed down because their founder was the sun god of that generation, Fisher Tiger. The original captain of the Sun Pirates climbed the Red Line alone and freed every slave in Mary Geoise, an act almost nobody in the world would even attempt. And suddenly, a completely different picture emerges. 200 years earlier, the Iron Giant climbed that same wall to attack that same sacred ground. Fisher Tiger wasn't inventing a plan. He was repeating one. The third Nika failed, just like the ones before him. But the movement he started never died. It lived on through generation after generation of the Sun Pirates until it reached Fisher Tiger's hands. I genuinely don't know how I missed this for so long. Now the fourth user is where this theory gets personal, because she's not a warrior at all. Portgas D, Rouge, Gold Roger's wife, carried Ace for 20 months to hide his birth from the world government. The official explanation is willpower, but 20 months is borderline impossible even by One Piece logic, unless her body could do something no human body can. A rubber body is endlessly elastic. Organs, muscles, even the womb, all of it could stretch in ways no normal body could survive. That would explain both the impossible pregnancy and her death right after giving birth, the cost of pushing a rubber body that far for that long. And if Rouge was the fourth Nika, everything about Shanks's choices lines up differently. In chapter 1169, Shanks learns about Ace from Garp and immediately calls him his little brother, believing Ace would be the next pirate king. If Shanks already knew about the fruit and believed Ace was the next chosen one, the obvious conclusion is that he sailed to Fuchsia Village specifically to give the fruit to Ace, not Luffy. But the fruit has a will of its own, as the gorillas themselves said. It didn't wait for Ace. Luffy ate it by accident, and the entire future of the story changed. And that brings us to Luffy, the fifth user, and the first one since Joy Boy to fully awaken the fruit's power. Luffy died in Wano. His heart stopped. Momonosuke and Kato both stopped hearing his roar, official confirmation in universe that he was gone. And then the fruit made one final attempt, the same kind of attempt it might have made for the third Nika 200 years ago. Except this time, it worked. His heart restarted to the rhythm of the drums of liberation. Tsunesha heard it from Onigashima and announced Joy Boy's return. The Iron Giant on Egghead, finally close enough, woke up and stood. A cycle that lasted 3,000 years finally turned out differently. Personally, I think Oda has been building this exact structure since the Void Century flashbacks first started. 5 sun gods, 5 failures, and 1 final chance. The first Nika had no allies left to save him. Joy Boy ran out of time. The third Nika fought alone. Rouge sacrificed her own life just to keep the bloodline breathing. But Luffy has the crew, the timing, and the will that didn't get passed down. It got carried forward, and if I'm right, the moment this gets fully confirmed is going to break the fandom. If this theory holds up, it means every single random detail about the Iron Giant, Fisher Tiger, and even Ace's birth was Oda planting pieces of the same puzzle for over 20 years. But I want to know what you think. Did Oda plan all 5 users from the start, or is some of this just pattern matching on my end? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want to go deeper on Joy Boy's actual crew, I've got the full breakdown linked right here.